What I was saying is, if you pick up male magazines or literature for the male interest, those things come up less frequently. They do come up at times, but the cleaning and the shopping and stuff absent, absolutely absent from male literature for the most part. Um, Even when they're divested of their supernatural potential, that is the house chores, the domestic sphere, women's sensibilities still require strong social control to keep them in check. And I think of the peer pressure, the pressure of women who step outside the rules of what is acceptable female behavior. And once again, I think back to actresses, singers, movie stars who actually transgress in their role, their open role, who don't align themselves properly to the white male patriarchy. Then there's definitely condemnation that comes down upon them, and how they work that is actually going to make the difference of whether they succeed or not. And finally, the conclusion for the witch's senses that comes from the shifting sensorium is the center of the earth in this story can be understood to represent the dark inner feminine world of sensibility, a world readily accessible to the witch, but inaccessible to the eye of reason or the instruments of modern technology. If one accepts subversive cosmology, it would seem that the eye-opening dissection fails to establish the unreality of witchcraft. The experimental philosophies cannot altogether fathom the secrets of nature, and that there are some aspects of existence that cannot be forced into visibility. I thought some of the things that came out in this was there's a problem with our language because our language is gendered. The feminine world still is depicted in literature as a world that's not of reason, it's of emotion. Reason is becoming more a part of it, but it is definitely an emotive world where there's lack of technology. It's dark, it's inner, it's domestic, it's not public, and it comes down to nature versus science and nature versus nurture. And there is something mystical and mythical about the world of woman still. So if we maintain the mystification and mythification of it, then it's something that's we don't have to, conversation of understanding doesn't have to take place because it's made into something that is unreal and unrespected. So the second part of Darwin's discuss comes to the volatile effects. And I had spoken about one of those poems where I read earlier, where in the sense of smell is actually something that's aggressive. It's an invasion of personal space. And this is the piece of theory that I was thinking of when I had read that poem. So I'm going to just read again parts from this, and this goes into art and architecture. And this, at the end of this, I'm going to speak about where I'm going with my project from here. Volatile effects is a phrase utilized by Walter Pater in his dismissal of architecture from the realm of the aesthetic. He postulated that architecture, as the most concrete and utilitarian of arts, could not evoke the subtleties of human spirit. Rather, it could only present an artistic sensibility via oblique traces and ethereal suggestions. Architecture, which begins in the practical need, can only express by vague hint of symbol and spirit or mind of the artist. This spiritualities, rather than seen, can lurk about architectural form as volatile effects, to be gathered from it by reflection. Across the diversity of sites, from galleries, museums, and site-specific installations to office buildings, theme parks, entertainment, and the public space of the city, the presence of smell has multiple significations. So we're going to look at the first part of this essay briefly, and that is how it examines the inodorateness of the white cube and the ideology implicit in the process of reduction, sanitizing, streamlining, deodorizing, that have contributed to the development of a paragon of exhibition display. So we're going to talk about the white cube. And there is one part where one of the poems I read talks about that box that they keep trying to shove me into, and I was thinking of this piece of theory when I did it. So the white cube functions as a visual machine in odorateness. Smells are pathological as a form of pollution, of symptomatic of pests, a threat to both the collection and the personal, thus rendering olfactory artworks as immediately suspicious, if not dangerous. The link between anosmia, or smelllessness, of the white cube and the discourse of hygiene has its roots in the deodorizing campaigns of the late 18th century. And this olfactory intolerance has continued in earnest ever since, widening its scope from urban to public spaces to interior and domestic domains. No place, though, is truly inodorate. And I found it was really interesting that a lot of these theories where they're trying to grapple with things have this etymological, ideological path that they trace back to the earlier origins. So now that we're in 2013, these are relevant conversations and things that have been inherited through the etymology of existence. So ideology has passed this on unquestioned and unchallenged to our present day. Continuing with the reading, deodorization is thus always incomplete and imperfectly realized. Places still have characteristic smells. The hygiene impulse operative here, then, is one that exists at a level of discourse and ideology, but which is only partially enactable at the level of practical experience. White paint, smooth surface, and geometric perfection point not only to an intolerance of the olfactory, but to a distrust of the organic, of the sensual, of anything alluding to the realities and the controversies of the external world. The white cube also functions as a disciplinary technology, a means to compartmentalize, isolate, and train perception. The arts have long been utilized as an arena for the development of manners. The result of this training is never simply the exercise or development of the body and its potential, but to produce what Tony Bennett calls prudential subjects. Museums of the 19th century overtly acknowledged their goal of disciplining and disinfecting the subordinate classes. The imperative of sanitization was intended on both metaphorical and literal terms with regard to the bodies, minds, and souls of the indigent, the working poor, recent immigrants, and ethnically diverse populations. And that, to me, I thought, was something that the working class and immigrants and the disadvantaged and ethnically diverse are keenly aware of, that they are not welcome to this white box, geometric, perfect, smooth surfaced arena that has the distrust of the world that they live in, which would be the organic and the sensual and the external world. The white cube liberated modern art from the common association with decadence, insanity, sensuality, and female frivolity. Simultaneously, it revealed an inherent masculine and authoritarian character of formalist aesthetics. As much as the white cube is a haven from the chaos of the contemporary industrial and cosmopolitan world, it is an hectic pace, the space isolated from social and political cares, protected from history, contingency, and accountability, the inverse, i.e., the everyday is positioned as pathological, dangerous, degenerate. I thought that particular ending of the white cube and the way they summarized it spoke to the ivory tower existence of academia, which is one of the things that I'm actually working with. So questions were raised as to whether the everyman actually read poetry, enjoyed poetry, understood poetry. So were they willing and open to engage with poetry? So that's what started the whole project for me, was the drive to go out into the real and engage with the real world after I had absorbed some academic theory, and to answer some questions, what the questions as they arose, to actually go out and engage. So I'm going to continue with the last little quote, and then I'll talk about the project that I'm setting up. Attention to olfaction and the phenomenology of architecture also brings forth ethical issues of personal and public accountability, lest they be dismissed as merely a question of ornamentation. Scents are a powerful and significant presence because of the potential health and psychological effects. The answer is precisely the chemical nature of olfaction. Because actual molecules are ingested into the body, critics of environmental fragrancing argues that the affected individuals should be given the opportunity to provide voluntary informed consent. And we talked about in the course how it was like an invasion of your personal space, because when you smell something, you're actually consuming particles of that actual thing. So, introduce the next phase of my project and closing down this phase of it. I will continue to go out every couple of days and try to interview a couple people here and there as I go. But I'm working with a local architect. His name is William Lang from Green Army Design. And we are building poetry booths. So it's going to be engaging in poetry on multiple levels. And one of the booths will be the poetry, just words, just typed paper, no handwriting, and they will be there for people to consume. I might do some handwritten ones as well to kind of create an environment of words that actually speak with as a gesture, where if it's just typed, it doesn't have that gesture in it, to where we know you can tell something about the person, what the person was feeling by how they stroke their pen. The second booth will be just verbal read poetry, so it'll be just the vocal poetry without the words present. The third will be videotaped poets reading their poetry, so you can see the body language is going to be added to it, and you will have the sound added to it. The fourth phase will be actual poets sitting in the booth. You walk in, and these are going to be very confined spaces, so I'm trying to force people out of their comfort zone by forcing them into a cocoon-like space. And they're going to be very blank, almost like a white box, if you will. So it's very sterile environment. So by the time they get to the fourth, there'll be this mirrored sterility, and when they walk in, they'll be thrust into this space that's just a bit larger than the original space. But they will come in close contact with a poet who will then read poetry to them. And then the fifth booth will be where they can go in and they can hear other people who have engaged with poetry, and they can also record a response. Do you like poetry would be question number one. Do you think it's influential will be question number two. And then they will speak to the experience of going to these booths and experiencing poetry on a very real corporeal level, at the varying degrees, what they like, didn't like, and then those will be posted to my blog and then to my page. So that's going to be one of the things we look at, is art and architecture, and how it can be used as a discipline, and how we can actually remove a person's physical comfort zone through this white cube use of technology. And then I'm going to actually talk to the architect. I'm going to read him the parts out of this that I had, and engage in a conversation with him as an architect, how he sees the use of that. And then in closing, I am going to read an excerpt from The Catastrophe of Success by Tennessee Williams. And just because I love what he does, and it's kind of one of the things that inspires me to go out and do the things that I do. Not that I'm in any way as successful as him, because nobody is. It's Tennessee Williams after all. Going to start here. It is never altogether too late, unless you embrace the bitch goddess, as William James called her. With both arms and find in her smooth caresses exactly what the homesick little boy in you always wanted: absolute protection and utter effortlessness. Security is a kind of death, I think, and it can come to you in a storm of royalty checks beside a kidney-shaped pool in Beverly Hills, or anywhere at all that has removed from the conditions or anywhere at all that is removed from the conditions that made you an artist, if that is what you are or were intended to be. Ask anyone who's experienced the kind of success I'm talking about. What is good? Perhaps to get an honest answer, you will have to give him a shot of truth serum, but the word he will finally groan is unprintable in genteel publications. Then what is good? The obsessive interest in human affairs, plus a certain amount of compassion and moral conviction. The first made the experience of living something that must be translated into pigment, or ink, or bodily movement, or poetry, or prose, or anything that's dynamic and expressive. That's what's good for you if you're at all serious in your aims. William Saroyan wrote a great play on this theme, that purity of heart is the one success worth having. In the time of your life, live. The time is short, and it doesn't return again. It's slipping away while I write this, while you read this. The monosyllable of the clock is loss, 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 unless you devote your heart to its opposition. And I will actually post the link for this, because The Catastrophe of Success is a brilliant piece by Tennessee Williams. So going forward, I will revisit The Catastrophe of Success and Art and Architecture. I've thoroughly gone through that poem. Once again, you know, we go to the eyes, we have the sight, but I will post pictures of the installation once it's up and going. I will post when it's going to be coming to St. John, when it's going to be, there's a couple word festivals around the Maritimes that I will be visiting too. It's completely portable, so I will hopefully be visiting several different places, some rural places, I hope, so I can get some feedback from actual people who are so far removed from the academy and from theater and all of the different cultured things that we enjoy in areas where that it's profuse, and get their feedback and see how they engage with poetry and so on. So that's it. This is end of theory, and we're going on to the actual experiential poetry.